In the quiet village of Redwood Haven, farmland stretched in all directions under a lavish blue sky. At first glance, it looked like any idyllic countryside scene. Neat little homes with colorful shutters, dirt roads winding through gentle hills, and fields all around. Yet newcomers always noticed one spot that made Redwood Haven a local legend: the orchard at Merriweather Farm. On that farm stood row upon row of apple trees whose branches overflowed with plump, shiny apples of every hue: ambers, crimsons, and greens. The orchard was as picturesque as any painting, but beneath the leafy canopy there lurked a secret that both delighted and bewildered visitors. For these trees did not merely sway in the breeze like their ordinary counterparts. They spoke. And more than that, they argued. No one was entirely sure how the orchard of enchanted apple trees came to be. Some said it was an ancient family curse, others a wizard's botched experiment. One rumor blamed an eccentric horticulturist who used magical fertilizer after an all-night reading of dusty spellbooks. However it happened, the end result was the same. The orchard was alive with chatter, snarky commentary, and spirited debates. If you ventured down the orchard's main path, it took very little time before a branch would give a suspicious shake and a voice, low and scratchy, or high-pitched and nasal, would jolt your ears with an unsolicited opinion. Merriweather Farm had been in the Merriweather family for generations. The current caretaker, Leopold Merriweather, was a wiry fellow in his early 40s who wore overalls over flamboyantly patterned shirts. With a tuft of curly red hair popping out from beneath his straw hat, he was an easily spotted figure in Redwood Haven. Despite the orchard's reputation, Leopold seemed perfectly unflappable. He walked about with a calm, steady gait, showing off the orchard as though nothing was peculiar about it at all. Perhaps he had grown used to hearing snide remarks echo from every knothole. One bright summer morning, a rattling green tour bus pulled onto the farm's gravel driveway. Leopold prepared for the day's visitors by patting the orchard gate as if patting a trusty dog. "Now, mind your manners," he murmured to the trees. A bird nesting on one of the branches ruffled its feathers in response, though it was the tree that was likely to respond verbally, not the bird. Then the bus hissed to a stop, and out poured a group of tourists, cameras clicking, sunglasses perched on heads, and wide-brimmed hats flapping in the gentle breeze. Soon enough, the orchard would showcase its eccentric charm. "Hello, folks," called Leopold, approaching with a friendly wave. "Welcome to Merriweather Farm. We've got quite a treat for you today." The small crowd mumbled pleasantries, though a few wore expressions that indicated they were uncertain what sort of treat they were in for. Leopold led them to the wooden archway at the orchard's entrance. He began his well-rehearsed speech. A little orchard history, times best for picking apples, and most importantly, how to best handle any conversations with the trees. "You might hear them whispering," he said in a confiding tone, "and they might say something about you or your cousin or your funny hat." Leopold nodded at a woman in a large floral bonnet. "I recommend keeping your sense of humor. They're feisty, but mostly harmless. If they get too snarky, just remind them they can't exactly pull their own roots up to chase you." He tapped his foot on the ground, and a rustle ran through the nearest trees, as if they were collectively taking offense. The first bold tourist marched right up to a sturdy apple tree with bright red fruit. He cracked a confident grin, perhaps ready to prove that the orchard's story was a tall tale. "Hey there, tree," he greeted, trying not to laugh. "Do you talk?" A gust of wind set the tree's branches swaying, but at first all that emerged was a rustling of leaves. The tourist shrugged, about to turn away when suddenly a sharp, reedy voice squeaked. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Cargo Shorts, thinking he can talk to me like a dog. Rude?" Startled, the tourist stumbled backward. The tree rattled its branches indignantly as a small apple plopped onto the ground. The tourist's face turned red, and he found no immediate retort for the talking plant's pointed commentary on his attire. "This orchard is full of that kind of talk," Leopold said, subtly guiding the tourist away before he could start a full-blown argument. "Try not to take it personally. They're pretty sassy in summer. Must be the heat." Another visitor, an older gentleman with glasses perched on his nose, ventured toward a smaller apple tree that was thick with green, unripe apple. "My goodness," he said, peering through a pair of binoculars. "Shall we have a civilized conversation?" Civilized, the diminutive tree responded in a voice wavering between a hiss and a croak. Try being stuck in dirt for decades, forced to watch generations of humans wander by in mismatched socks. The man blinked, unsure if the tree was truly outraged by his pastel socks or his request for politeness. He opened his mouth to reply, but the tree continued. You want something civilized? Plant your own roots in the ground for 25 years, and we'll see how refined you are under those circumstances. The man laughed, which seemed to placate the cranky sapling somewhat. Leopold was pleased to see a visitor rolling with the orchard's oddities. The caretaker recalled a time when the orchard's commentary had offended a local mayor so much that the man refused to return for a decade, but that was long ago. Nowadays, the orchard was part of Redwood Haven's identity, a quirky claim to fame that drew tourists from near and far. As the tour moved deeper into the orchard, the canopy overhead grew thicker. Vines crept along the ground, forming miniature labyrinths around the tree trunks. Curiously placed benches invited visitors to rest in the orchard's dappled shade. But rest was rarely peaceful. For the moment you settled on a bench, a branch overhead might split the quiet with an insult about wrinkled shirts or unkempt hair. A tall, lanky man named Harvey had the misfortune of sitting beneath a particularly opinionated golden apple tree. Never seen legs so long and a torso so short, quipped the tree in a surprisingly deep baritone. You look like a grasshopper who forgot how to jump. Harvey, startled, dropped his water bottle, which rolled under a nearby bush. Excuse me, he managed, cheeks blazing. You heard me, the tree replied, swinging its thick boughs. Several golden apples bobbed as though nodding along with the insult. I'm just calling it like I see it. Harvey stood up quickly, too flustered to respond. Just then, an elderly lady with a cane tottered by and patted his arm. Don't mind that one, she said gently. My mother always said that a tree who lives in one place its whole life has a limited perspective. She turned her gaze upward, tilting her head so her wide-brimmed hat shadowed her face. Now, tree, if I were you, I'd consider how your trunk is shorter than your branches. Doesn't that make you look a bit unbalanced as well? A murmur of branches rustled indignantly. You humans and your sense of style, the golden apple tree muttered. But it fell silent, having met someone who could talk back with equal wit. Leopold, noticing the exchange, offered the old lady a thankful nod. The orchard was known to rattle nerves, but some visitors possessed the humor and quick wit to deflect the tree's odd brand of sass. Those who did often left Redwood Haven with a grin on their face, retelling the orchard stories to anyone who'd listen. Meanwhile, in another corner of the orchard, a group of teenage tourists had gathered around a cluster of trees with apples so red they seemed almost purple. The ringleader, a brash girl named Sasha, wanted to provoke a reaction. Hey, tree, how about you sing us a tune? She challenged, tapping a long fingernail against the bark. Her friends giggled behind her, their arms full of apples they'd collected. A sly, melodic voice drifted from the branches above. Entertain you, shall I? Why, yes, I'd be delighted, the tree cooed. Suddenly a shrill, off-key chorus sprang forth. La, 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 la. The teenagers shrieked in hysterical laughter at the dreadful singing. But the tree didn't stop, belting out notes that soared 2 octaves too high before plummeting below a reasonable pitch. Acorns in a nearby oak tree rattled their disapproval of the performance. Sasha's friends clamped their hands over their ears. All right, Sasha shouted, still laughing. Enough. I take it back. Sorry I asked. The purple-hued apple tree ended with a triumphant cackle. It was clearly unafraid to embarrass itself in the quest to annoy visitors. Further up the path, a British couple, the Winstons, had stumbled upon a particularly ancient apple tree that dwarfed the ones around it. Its gnarled trunk was knotted in several places, telling the tale of many years of growth. Mr. Winston approached to read the informational sign hammered into a short post by the tree's roots. It detailed that this was the oldest enchanted apple tree in Redwood Haven. Suddenly, a gravelly voice erupted from among the higher branches. Reading about me, are you? The ancient tree asked, a note of pride in its tone. Mrs. Winston smiled fondly. You must have so many stories to share, she said in a respectful hush. Stories? Of course I do, the old tree replied, branches creaking as though clearing its throat. I've seen lightning storms that turn the sky purple. I've watched squirrels wage silent wars over acorns. Though that's a dispute for the oak next door, not me. I've heard lovers carve their initials into bark. It paused. But if you want to know the truth, the biggest headache is dealing with meddling tourists, always asking the same questions. How can you talk? Why are you so sassy? The branches shivered in an approximation of a shrug, as if I asked for my bark to have this gift of gab. I say, Mr. Winston replied with heartfelt curiosity, would you prefer if people just let you be? Ha! As if that ever happened, the tree snapped. Not with Merriweather Farm offering orchard tours daily. Mrs. Winston, undeterred by the old tree's cranky undertones, asked, is there anything we could do to make your day brighter, friend? A moment passed. Then the old tree's gnarled bark seemed to relax, as though a furrow in its brow had smoothed. Well, it started more quietly, if someone were to bring a bit of fresh water directly to my roots, I'd not mind that. It's been unseasonably dry. Touched by the sincerity beneath the gruff exterior, Mr. Winston looked around until he found a spare watering can. He filled it from a nearby spigot and carefully poured the cool water at the base of the ancient trunk. The tree rustled its leaves in what might have been gratitude. You're all right, it muttered softly. You can come back any time. As the day progressed, the orchard rang with an odd harmony of human chatter and botanical backtalk. Leopold deftly navigated the orchard paths, offering tidbits of orchard lore to keep the visitors amused. In between, he'd wave off the more mischievous trees before they could cause serious insults or injury. A new wave of tourists, a pair of chatty college students, a man and his hyperactive son, and 3 ladies on a weekend trip entered. Each found themselves drawn into the orchard's comedic drama. I'm telling you, one of the college students said, adjusting her backpack, this orchard is the best extra credit project for my folklore class. She aimed her phone at a tree with green-stripped apples and asked, excuse me, tree, can you describe how you learned our language? She flipped her phone camera to recording mode. A sarcastic snicker answered her. Learned your language? More like you learned mine, kid. Trees have been around for thousands of years. We talk, you just never bothered to listen. Her companion nearly choked on laughter. Oh man, you've got to put that in your research report. Your professor's going to think you made it all up. They both turned to Leopold, as if to confirm whether they were indeed living through a bizarre dream. Leopold's amused grin told them everything they needed to know, that this was Redwood Haven's normal. Meanwhile, the man with the hyperactive son tried coaxing the boy to be polite. Now, Timmy, he said, the orchard is a special place, so let's not... But before he finished, Timmy bounded forward and hollered at the nearest tree. Hello, do you like being a tree? The orchard fell silent for half a second. Then a female-sounding voice from the leaves retorted, do you like having sticky hands and shouting nonsense? Timmy squealed, half delighted to be teased by a talking plant and half offended. Hey, my hands aren't sticky, he grumbled, eyeing the melted popsicle dripping down his palm. At that, the tree rattled its branches, as though it were chuckling. Timmy's father gave an apologetic look, though he couldn't fully contain his own grin. The orchard had a way of turning everything into a comedic routine, though one frequently laden with mild insults. Elsewhere, the trio of weekend trippers was determined to fill their wicker baskets with the orchard's famed apples. Carol, the boldest of the 3, approached a small tree absolutely laden with bright candy-colored apples. My, you're generous, she said, marveling at the clusters of fruit. Don't mind if we pick a few apples between wisecracks, do you? A nasal voice responded from the foliage. Take your fill, honey, I've got plenty. But you break a branch, you buy a new one. Got it? Carol nodded politely as she started picking. The other 2, Fiona and Margaret, joined in, gingerly selecting apples that practically glowed under the dappled light. Bet these taste amazing, Fiona said, placing a few in her basket. Only the best for me, the tree said, sounding pleased. Then it piped up, wait, hold on. Is that a cat hair on your sweater? Are you going to get cat hair in my orchard? Ugh. Fiona, startled, looked down at her light cardigan. Oh dear, Garfield must have rubbed against me before I left home, she laughed. Garfield, eh? Typical cat name, the tree grumbled. Well, at least you didn't name him Paws Castle or Chairman Meow. I've heard it all from passers-by. Margaret smothered a laugh. You're surprisingly well versed in cat puns. Comes with the territory, the tree sighed. We overhear a lot. Some days we wish we could just turn down the volume. By late afternoon, the orchard was buzzing with visitors sharing their tree encounters. A handful of people gathered near a small kiosk Leopold had set up to sell apple-based products, pies, jams, ciders, and something labeled tree tonic that promised to improve your sense of humor. Leopold worked the small stand with swift efficiency, collecting money and answering questions with practiced warmth. A curious tourist inquired whether the orchard's apples tasted different because of the magic. Folks claim they're the sweetest around, Leopold replied, perhaps a side effect of all that conversation. The trees have opinions about everything, including how sweet they want their fruit to be. A clamor arose among the orchard's front rows. It seemed that a boisterous family had piled out of a minivan. The father, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a Hawaiian shirt, boomed in a great baritone. Kids, come on, we're going to see these talking trees or bust. A wave of children came tearing into the orchard, shrieking in delight. Their mother tried to calm them, but it was no use. A nearby tree rustled its leaves furiously as one child swatted its trunk with a plastic sword. Ow! Knock it off, the tree yelped. Trees aren't for whacking. The father gawked, unsure if he should be more astonished that the tree was yelling at his child or that he was hearing a talking tree at all. Leopold hurried over to defuse the situation. Easy now, kiddos, he said gently. The orchard might not appreciate that. He pried the plastic sword from the boy's hands, and the tree gave a regal sniff, if a tree could sniff. Apology accepted, the tree muttered. But if there's any more of that nonsense, I might just drop an apple on your head. It shook its branches pointedly, causing a few leaves to flutter. All right, we get it, the man said, chuckling nervously. Sorry, buddy. The family ambled off deeper into the orchard, guiding the children to pick fruit more politely. Leopold sighed in relief. As the sun started its slow descent, casting long shadows across the rows of apple trees, the orchard's chatter wound down to a softer hum. Some of the tourists returned to their tour buses or cars, baskets of apples in hand, vivid memories tucked away. Others ambled about, snapping last-minute pictures in the golden sunlight. The orchard itself fell into that odd transitional mood, still brimming with life, but calmer, as though the magic that animated each trunk and branch was content to rest until morning. A final cluster of tourists, including a shy woman in a simple blue dress, paused near the orchard entrance. She had spent most of the afternoon quietly observing, refraining from talking to the trees for fear of what they might say. But now, as she stood by the gate, something in her compelled her to try. She approached a younger tree with pink blossoms still clinging to it, despite the apple buds that were already forming. Hello, the shy woman said softly. You have beautiful blossoms. The tree responded in a gentle, soothing tone. Thank you. I try to keep them fresh for as long as possible. It makes me feel pretty, I suppose. The woman smiled, surprised by the tree's humility. You sound kinder than the others, she added, glancing around. The tree let out a delicate sigh. Oh, we have our feisty ones and our mild-mannered ones too, just like you humans, I guess. It's the orchard's destiny to talk, but that doesn't mean we all talk the same way. A blossom drifted down, swirling around the woman's feet. It's nice to have a peaceful conversation for once, the tree said. The woman hesitated, then nodded. Yes. This orchard is unique and marvelous. Thank you for sharing a moment with me. Leopold appeared then, giving a polite nod. Closing time soon, he announced to the last group. Thanks for visiting Merriweather Farm. The orchard needs its rest, so come on back whenever you like, but be prepared. They don't change their tune easily. Everyone slowly filed out as evening deepened. The orchard gate creaked shut behind the visitors, leaving the talking trees to their own murmurings in the soft gloom. If one pressed an ear to the orchard fence after dark, they might catch faint echoes of leafy whisperings, as though the trees indulged in their own private arguments and jokes long after humans were gone. Inside the farmhouse, Leopold hung his straw hat by the door and sighed, as he did every evening. His daily routine included a hot mug of chamomile tea, a few bites of apple crumble pie, made painstakingly from orchard apples that had been volunteered, grudgingly of course, and, as the orchard insisted, only those that were fully ripe and ready to go, and a quiet reflection on the day's comedic chaos. Letting tourists mingle with enchanted apple trees was no ordinary job, but Leopold had grown to relish it. Each day brought new amusements, from a sassy branch calling out a flamboyant shirt to a wise old trunk telling stories about centuries past. Still, he'd sometimes wonder if the orchard was truly content or if, in some corner of its magical existence, it wished for silence. Perhaps one day, a new caretaker might discover a way to dispel the enchantment. Yet, whenever that idea nudged into Leopold's mind, he'd recall the mischievous, playful spirit that lit up the eyes of visitors' children, bursting into giggles, couples forging memories, and old folks trading jibes with centuries-old bark. It was a kind of magic that Redwood Haven treasured. After all, the orchard had taught folks the fine art of not taking themselves too seriously. Where else could you witness a teenager bantering with a tree about pop music, or watch an elderly lady outwit a golden apple branch with brilliant comebacks? Where else could you see an entire busload of tourists exit simultaneously exasperated and delighted by the produce? Life in Redwood Haven might have been quaint, but it was never dull. Outside, twilight cloaked the orchard's silhouettes in deep purple. Crickets chirped, and an owl's distant call drifted across the fields. In the orchard, the rustling of leaves was the only real sign that these trees were anything other than normal. Occasionally, a few of the feisty fruit bearers would trade barbs about the day's visitors, discussing who wore the tackiest outfit, who asked the silliest question, or who took the best snapshot. The older trees might chastise the younger ones for their rudeness, reminding them that it was the farm's livelihood that fed their roots and kept them thriving. In a far corner near a weathered scarecrow, the orchard's shyest tree listened attentively to an eager sapling that was reciting bits of knowledge overheard from a tourist's phone conversation. "Did you know," squeaked the sapling, "that humans have these weird things called tweets, which they send through something called the internet?" The older tree startled. "Tweets? Isn't that what birds do?" The sapling giggled with the squeak of a branch in the wind, setting off a round of quiet leaf rustling that might have been akin to laughter. Such was the life of the orchard when no one was looking, still full of voices but gentler, lacking the audience that fueled their daytime theatrics. They continued in this subdued harmony until the moon climbed high and the stars blanketed Redwood Haven's sky. One by one, the trees fell into the hush of nighttime reflection, readying themselves for another day of comedic disputes and unexpected camaraderie. News spread quickly beyond Redwood Haven of a place where apple trees were anything but ordinary. Some visitors came seeking a magical experience. Others showed up with science on their minds, determined to research how pollen or pheromones or some undiscovered phenomenon could produce speech from logs and leaves. But no matter what theories they brought, each left with more questions than answers, and a sense of wonder that perhaps some things are best appreciated rather than fully explained. Across the countryside, folks might have sworn they heard a faint sound of orchard quarreling on the breeze. But Redwood Haven's residents knew that was simply their everyday soundtrack, a never-ending comedic performance from dozens of opinionated fruit trees. Was it a curse or a blessing? Possibly both, depending on whom you asked. One thing was certain: Redwood Haven's orchard was alive in more ways than one, and so were the hearts of the many people who passed under its branches. As the last glimmers of moonlight bathed the farm and sleep settled across the orchard, the trees, so full of spunk during the day, collectively exhaled. They would speak again tomorrow, speak 100 new lines of banter to a fresh set of eager tourists. For this was their way: loud, argumentative, yet somehow comforting. Because in Redwood Haven, magic lived in every root, leaf, and apple, reminding all who came that sometimes even the most feisty conversation can bear the sweetest fruit.